everybody, and welcome back to Brainwave. And finally, we have Secret Invasion Easter Egg Hunt. Very excited for this. Like I said, it's been a while. I wanted to do this breakdown of the first episode a while ago. However, I had to make a list because I cannot show certain pictures with Disney Plus and stuff. That's a little bit weird, so my apologies on that. But we finally have it, and trust me, guys, I may have 3 sheets of paper of just all Easter eggs. So very excited to explain them all down. And on top of that, we even have Marvel's official Secret Invasion trailer in the background, so you won't be able to see everything that I'm explaining. I have time signatures for that specific reason, but you will definitely be able to see what is on the screen. So if I have to refer to anything on this, I can. Like I said, Marvel official trailer. This trailer is amazing, by the way, high quality trailer. But yeah, so I'm gonna be explaining some of the stuff now. So let's talk about the first stuff. So episode 1 of Secret Invasion. At 0:34 seconds, we have Everett Ross, and we haven't seen him in a bit, so it's kind of exciting to see him finally. I don't believe he's in this trailer shot here, but Everett Ross is in this underground tunnel almost, and he's under some flickering lighting. There's a light above this tunnel, and it's flickering, and this is kind of leading up to the fact that he is not a human, and it's kind of crazy how they add these visual effects because normally you would not be able to you would not expect it, and when you're first watching the series you don't expect it to be a scroll. However, there's always hints and little details pointing at the scroll being there. So at first we don't know that, though. We're starting out 34 seconds. We don't know Ross is a scroll. However, we continue after that to 44 seconds, and a Prescott, who we find out Ross is visiting later on, talks about the truth and who do you trust? Who do we go to trust? And what if the people we could trust weren't real? And it's kind of insane. I think the lines exactly are something on the lines of, we go to the people we care about to trust, but what happens if those people we trust aren't human at all, or something like that. I forgot the exact lines. The lines are bone chilling though when you hear these lines, and it really makes you think, who is a scroll? Because realistically in the MCU, a scroll can be anyone. A scroll can literally be, like, I mean, and we see that with Ross, like later on, like literally a minute in, because you don't expect someone like Ross to be a scroll, but he ends up being one anyway. So very, very exciting stuff. But like I said, Ross, or the fake Ross, goes to Prescott's office or wherever this is. It's kind of like a safe house, kind of. And when he walks in, he sees a bunch of different newspapers and news channels on his computers about different worldwide phenomenons, like different kinds of attacks by different kinds of terrorist groups. Now, obviously, these terrorist groups are all linked together, and that's what Prescott is saying. Prescott is saying that all these different kinds of attacks have all been linked, even though they're not from the same kinds of groups. Now, it's kind of insane to see, but some of these places that they attack even include London. Include London. I saw something like Brazil. I think I saw. I don't really remember, but there's a ton of different stuff there, and it's really kind of crazy. And then Ross, the fake Ross, says that he cannot trust him. He cannot basically just call Nick Fury down from Saber, which is where he was at before episode 1 of Secret Invasion. And Ross does not want to call him down because he's like, I don't have enough proof. Well, Prescott shows him the tape of the Skrulls' attack plan for Unity Day in Russia, which we later see in the rest of this episode. But we see Ross look at this, and the camera actually cuts. Now, you might be wondering, why does this cut? Well, the reason it cuts is because Ross already knows about this plan. He is a Skrull. The reason this Skrull was sent over to Prescott was to get this information so no one else knew it. And Prescott actually sees this because right as Ross is leaving, he attacks him. However, the Skrull imposter is able to get the hand on his gun quick enough and ends up killing him. Now, this is kind of insane because now what we still think is Ross is running from this, looks to be like this chaser, right? And they go through this whole sequence, which is an incredible chase scene. But Ross ends up jumping off of a roof. Now, we see that Ross does not instantly die after he falls off that roof. Now, obviously, a human may not instantly die from falling off that height of a roof. At about this is at about 5:08, 5:06 ish, or like 7 minutes around there. But Ross ends up falling off this building because he ends up being chased by this follower for quite some time. They end up going to the roofs of buildings, and Ross ends up trying to make a jump to another building and ends up failing. Now that fall, right? Maybe could have a human could have survived that, right? However, Ross is still trying to crawl away, and it's kind of incredible because, as you may know, Skrulls have super strength and super speed. They're kind of like super soldiers. They're a little bit weaker, but they're not as weak as humans. So it just goes to show you that this entire time, this first part of the episode has been hinting at Ross being a Skrull, and it's kind of crazy. And then we finally get our first glance at Maria Hill, who tries to apprehend the follower, but it turns out to be Talos, and Ross turns out to be an enemy Skrull. And that's just insane for me to think because the entire time you're misconcepted into Ross running away from this guy, and it turns out that Talos is the good guy chasing him, and it's incredible. But let's go on to the next scene. Nick Fury comes out from this spaceship, which is the clip I actually have here. Let's mute this. Let's go over to here. Fury comes from a spaceship. This is Saber. Saber is the spaceship that we see in the Marvels trailer, and we know Fury kind of works on that spaceship, right? But he gets beamed down from it, and he emerges from this kind of like capsule or whatever it is, and Maria Hill meets him in the middle of the woods. Now, as you guys may tell during the scene, he's actually kind of limping, and the reason for that is because the gravity on Saber is a lot more different than gravity on Earth. And we know that Fury, since the blimp, has been on Saber, so that's a long time in space. But he's back on Earth, and he instantly meets up with Talos. At Maria Hill's safe house in Moscow. And by the way, this whole episode is set in Moscow, which is great because Moscow in the MCU is pretty well known for having its events. But we go to Maria Hill's safe house, and Nick Fury meets Talos on the roof. Talos talks about a plant that his wife Soren brought to Earth called a Centomilica. This plant apparently adapts to Earth's surroundings, and this is similar to how Talos wants to adapt to Earth's surroundings and the good Skrulls that don't want to attack Earth and take it over. Now, Soren, we realize that Soren has died, and further in the episode, it actually reveals something more. I won't explain it now, but eventually I will get into that part. Next, after Fury and Talos grieve almost kind of in this moment, they go back downstairs and talk about the plan that the Skrulls had. Now, before they talk about this plan, though, they talk about where the Skrulls are hiding. Russia has a bunch of abandoned nuclear power plants, and the Skrulls are living there. And it turns out that Skrulls are immune to radioactive activity, which is kind of incredible because they're already overpowered already, and now they have access to nuclear plants where people can't access. Yeah. This base turns out to be New Skrullos, which we'll find out later. But people continue to mention uh, Maria Hill continues to hint at Fury being away from Earth ever since the blimp, and we don't really know what that means until this next scene. Fury decides he wants to take a walk because he knows that if they do not stop this Skrull invasion, his race will cease to exist, the human race. And he comes up on these three different people. We have a wife who stares at him awkwardly. We have a man near a shawarma truck, which obviously shawarma is what the Avengers had at the end of the first movie, which is very, really cool to see that Easter egg. So he passes a shawarma truck and he sees an old man who also stares at him. Then lastly, we see a little girl who stares at him. This will come into play later on, but let's explain what happens after this. So after he sees this, he gets attacked, or well, I wouldn't say attacked. He gets jumped by these two henchmen bodyguards, and he gets put into a van, and he gets taken over to Sonya Fallsworth's safe house. Now, hold up, give me like 10 seconds. Okay, now, Sonya Fallsworth is the person he meets up in the safe house, and eventually he will talk to her about certain stuff. However, there is a part that I did want to talk about before I talk about this part, and that is the fact that uh, Rhodey and President Ritson are seen in the White House, and Rhodey is talking about how Nick Fury has had zero contact in his left saber, and he has had contact with Maria Hill, and he is considering them AWOL. Now, we don't know who is going to be a Skrull in this series. We know someone deep in our hearts is going to be a Skrull, and honestly, I'm putting my suspicions on Rhodey. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because Rhodey has worked with Nick Fury. I mean, he's worked with Nick Fury before, so for him to just say that he's AWOL and just instantly suspect that is kind of suspicious to me. Now, we do have future shots of Rhodey in Secret Invasion from past teasers, so I don't really know how that's going to work, but so far after season 1 or episode 1, Rhodey is looking kind of suspicious. But now let's finally get on to Sonya Fallsworth's safe house. And if you don't know who Sonya Fallsworth is, it's an old companion of Nick Fury who seemed to have went on missions with him as well. And we don't know exactly, but some people suspect that she could have a relation to Montgomery Fallsworth, who is a part of the Howling Commandos in the first Avenger, Captain America: The First Avenger. So hopefully that's the case, because that'd be a really cool bloodline story there. So hopefully that is the case. Now, Sonya is talking to Fury about certain things in this moment, and while she is doing this, Fury actually puts a camera on one of the owl statues in the room, showing how he still has kick in him. But that is not the point that everyone is trying to make, and you'll later see this in future scenes. Now, after this point, Sonya points out her clocks, which represent a agent who has died in the past. So every time an agent has died, a clock has been put up there. And directly after this part, which is at around 2034, they talk about Fury not being cut out for the mission and the Skrull invasion. And in some aspects, she's wrong, but in others, she is right. And the reason for this is because Fury still has the kick in him and he still has the smarts to do it. However, he is not as strategic as he was, or is not as vigilant as he was. And it's going to leave opening for error, and we're going to see that at the end of this episode. But finally, after quite some time, we see Gaia. Now, I don't know if Gaia is in this trailer. Here's Sonya Fallsworth here. You're in no shape for this fight. This is the scene with the safe house right here. That's good to know. And we see Gaia here. This is a version of Gaia that's going to be in future episodes most likely. This is also another scene from the safe house. But let's talk about Gaia real quick. So we meet Gaia for the first time, and that is because a character named Bento is coming up on the New Scrollos territory. And the way that he accesses this territory is by saying the quote, home in my own skin, which is really going to be the aspect for these scrolls because the scrolls never really had a home, even to begin with. Even in Captain Marvel, the scrolls really never had a home, and they never really had a place to live where they could just be themselves. So, home in their own skin is realistically all they really want. And that is when Gaia shows up in the next shot, driving Bento to the secret location. She explains to him that they grow only scroll produce. And I feel like that's the reason she mainly left her father. And it's mainly because of the fact that she doesn't want harm to come to any planet like directly. However, she also does not want to leave the scrolls without a home. And that's really the uh, two sides between the scrolls, which makes it very interesting. Very, very interesting. But we go we see the shop, and she goes all the way to New Scrollos, which is the new location for scroll life on Earth. And she explains to Bento as she walks around through this basically refugee camp. She talks about how the warriors, the scroll warriors, stay in their human forms because they don't want to get caught. And on top of that, they also get to leave the compounds while all the other Squirrel civilians do not. So that's kind of a twist because you hear them talking about home in their own skin, but realistically, the people there are not living in their own skin. And I guess ultimately that is the end game goal for them. But it's kind of suspicious, and it's something that we'll see Gravik, the leader, kind of touch on in a little bit. But as she's taking him through this tour, she tells Bento to wait and let to wait there where he can get supplies, and she walks through this set of doors and ends up going to what we call, or what I call at least, the memory chambers. So these memory chambers we see in the scene directly after this. We see, I believe, hold up, let me check real quick. I believe this is at, hold up, checking my papers. I believe this is at around 24 minutes, around there. We see Gaia and these memory chambers, and we see Gravik initiating a new warrior into battle. And the way he does that is takes a he takes a person from the Americans Against Russia Association, and the scroll takes his body. They put him in the memory chamber, and he takes his mind. And this is actually kind of leading up towards what the rest of the show might be. We know Super Scrolls were in the initial trailers for this show, so that's going to be very, very exciting. I believe they're actually in this trailer. Let's see. Yeah, this is these are all later scenes, by the way. Don't worry about this right now. But but we see we see these chambers, and I think they're going to lead to Super Scrolls. Super Scrolls, if you don't know, are scrolls that have the abilities to take the body of people, the minds of people, and also their powers. So if scrolls weren't already dangerous enough, if they all become super scrolls, yeah, the world's kind of dead. So it makes this all but more intriguing. And it's really just crazy because these scrolls are going to make such a huge impact that we don't normally expect from people, considering that the fact that the Earth has already seen Thanos and they thought it couldn't get worse, and now you got Skrulls who actually might end up getting powers and look like other people. So it's gonna get crazy, I'm telling you guys. But next we see um next we see Gravik and Gaia both staying in their human form and using human objects. Now, the way Gaia and Gravik use these human objects is very different. We see Gaia, who is basically almost studying from this uh, Understand How to Be Human book. And she's basically almost studying their ways, right? Well, we see Gravik, who is not acknowledging anything and is kind of just playing around with normal human food. And it's kind of crazy to think about that because Gaia is willing to embrace human life if it means they get a home, but Gravik is not willing to embrace human life in general. And it's kind of going to lead up to eventually her betrayal of this team. Now, before this happens, though, Gaia is sent on a mission by Gravik's, uh, Gravik's sidemen, Pagon. And Pagon is actually in the comics. He's a Skrull who works for Gravik in this show, and he's a pretty important Skrull member. So I think if there are going to be Super Skrulls in the series, he is going to become one of them. So very, very interesting stuff. But he assigns Gaia to go on a mission to get bomb parts from a Russian dealer who turns out to be a Skrull. Of course, right? So Nick Fury and Talos are infiltrating the scene. This is right after Gaia leaves in 30 minutes directly, pretty much around there. And as Gaia is leaving, Maria Hill begins to track her. Now, while Maria Hill is tracking Gaia, they talk about midlife crises because technically in alien years Talos is 136 years old, but realistically he's younger than 50 in human years. And he talks to Fury about what was his midlife crisis, and he says it's the Avengers, and I would not be surprised about that. The Avengers fought Chitauri, they fought Ultron, they fought Thanos. I mean, they fought really everyone realistically. But yeah, so I'm not surprised to hear that. Then Fury talks to this Russian dealer himself. Obviously, he's kind of threatening him here, and he's saying, "You only get one lie, not another." And he's saying that everyone only gets one and not two. And this is kind of surprising because a man like Nick Fury, we suspect doesn't have any lies. But if he's saying this logic, that means he must have one lie uh, at some point during his life. So that's going to be very interesting to see. And eventually, this Skrull imposter gets suspicious and it starts attacking. So Talos decides to jump in and he tells Fury to not intervene. And Talos fights this Skrull imposter basically to the bitter end. And it ends up him basically almost getting killed, and Fury saves his life. Now, he told him not to intervene, and I'm assuming Talos has something to prove here, which is kind of weird because normally Talos is not really one to have to prove himself, but it turns out that is the case here. But let's continue. Fury talks about uh after that, Maria chases Gaia, and Talos eventually catches up to them, realizing it's his daughter. He tells her that Soren died to the people that she works for. And as she escapes to Talos, she basically just kind of breaks down, which you would expect because normally in this situation, you wouldn't really know what to think. But I think Gaia and Talos actually have the same mindset. Talos has to prove something as Gaia does because she feels regret for working for the people that killed her mother. And this is definitely seen in the next few scenes of this episode. But for now, let's talk about how Fury and Maria Hill played chess in this Russian bar. And she talks about how he doesn't isn't keen of all of his surroundings, and it's leaving gaps for error. Like I said, this is building up to something. Then, like I said, I told you about Gaia regretting her decisions, and she goes back to Talos and gives them information about the attack. Now, Gaia talks about how the uh, bags with the weapons in them will be sprayed infrared so that they will be able to identify them. Essentially, her leaving Gravik's control, which is great to see. But they take they try to stop this attack on Unity Day, which is actually a Russian holiday. I forgot for what it is exactly. I might look it up later and get some more details on that. But I know it's a Russian holiday, and it's one that a lot of Russians celebrate. So it makes sense for Skrulls to try to stop this event from happening and frame it on other countries such as the US. Now, eventually, the Skrulls do this trade off with the bags. Fury, Hill, and Talos all go all go and chase these people down. And when Fury does, he chases his man down, and he realizes that the scroll that was uh, taking forms as the wife, the daughter, and the old man all were Gravik this entire time. And it's kind of weird to see that because normally Gravik has a bunch of men on the scene, but instead of all the men being on the scene, he decides to go see for himself, which is not something you expect from a leader. And it really just shows that he's got some kind of alternate intentions for doing this. And on Maria's person, along with Talos, they get baited by these two bag carriers with their nothing being in the bags as baits. Same as Gaia. Gaia also got baited as well. And eventually, Gravik gets his way, and the weapon ends up going off. Now, Maria Hill is seen helping people in the crowd, and she sees what she believes to be Nick Fury. This is at the very, very end of the episode. She sees Nick Fury. She gets kind of relieved and realizes that it is Gravik as she gets shot. A person that has been in the MCU for over 11 years has just been taken out by someone who she thought was Nick Fury. Now, the real Nick Fury comes over maybe 30 seconds later and realizes what happened. And her last words are probably the most painful last words of any dying character ever. Her last words were, "It was you." Now, this could be misinterpreted or interpreted in different ways, but I think what she was trying to say is giving Fury a warning that the person that killed me was disguised as you. Not as, oh, it was you and I, like, how did you do this? It was more telling Fury that it was him. Uh, and that is how the episode ends. Maria Hill's dead body lying there. And folks, that is the episode of Secret Invasion. And my God, I must say, it was glorious. We haven't had a super, 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 super serious Marvel show in a very, really long time. And this definitely set the tone for one of the best. So, very excited to see what comes with this season of Secret Invasion, and I'm really excited to see the rest of it. But for now, hope you guys have enjoyed the breakdown. Don't worry, a new Five Nights at Freddy trailer has released. That will be coming out soon, or my reaction to that will be coming out soon. Wolves might be there with me. I don't know yet. Have to see. But for now, hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.